Thank you, Doug, our new president, and he's got some big shoes to fill. Pete Newsom, and I'd like to thank Pete for all his years of what he did for us. Once again, I'm here to induct the Veterans Committee, people that were active in the earlier years of the sport, pretty much, and we have a group of 4 or 5 people. We kind of caucus, get together, decide who should be in, among which was the esteemed Mr. Zanotti, who preceded me, Joe Lee from Vermont, and the gentleman, the mayor of Cambridge, Bruce Cohen, who's also in attendance today. And we kind of hash it out, we try to get an equitable group of people covering all the genres of racing and the ages, and all qualified people. This year we feel we have a good crew. We have Bert Brooks, who is from Connecticut, Bertha Small, who was a pioneer lady from Rhode Island, and Harold Hanaford from the North Woods of Vermont. And I'll keep it kind of brief. We have a few words on Bert Brooks, and I understand Mr. Brooks' son is in attendance today that we weren't aware of earlier on in the process, and we would have made a little more note of that, but somebody who should know informed me he was here. Bert came to Connecticut from, was born in New Brunswick, stayed briefly in Maine in his youth, and came to Connecticut. Before World War II, he raced motorcycles, and he got into the midgets right after the war, late 1945, made his debut at Cherry Park at Avon, Connecticut. He picked up some good rides. He was the ARDC Ford champion in 1947 at Candlelight Stadium in Bridgeport, at Empire Speedway in Menands, New York, and the Century Stadium right up the road here in West Springfield. And he was the ARDC overall circuit champion with a Ford from 1950 through 53. And I'm sure you all remember that car was the Don Smith 099 from over in New York State, a little twin fire or crossfire V860, as you will. Then Bert went to the United Racing Club, sprint cars. And he was their champion at 54, 56, 57, and 58. And in 54 and 56, he was running the Dubuel Arden, which was an overhead valve conversion rig on a flathead block. And that was a pretty exotic engine, but it performed well for Bert. He ended up with 37 wins in the URC competition. Some records keep it a little sketchy, but after 1955, it's documented that Bert won 18 races with the ARDC and 6 with New England Midget Association. In 56, he ran a sprinter that Chuck Arnold drove for him, another Connecticut man. He returned to ARDC in 1959, and he finished second in points then, and also in 1960. He did have a ride at Indianapolis in 1961 in a Frank Curtis car, but he wasn't able to qualify. And unfortunately, Bert won his last race, which was a heat at Hershey, Pennsylvania, on September 2nd, 1968, and died from fatal injuries during the feature that day. And 2 things I always remember about Bert Brooks. One, Mr. Zanotti reinforced in my memory. You see a photo of Bert Brooks, and he was an open-wheel race car driver. He looked like if he didn't get by you, he might consider pounding the daylights out of you. But he was a nice guy. And other thing I remember personally, in the early to mid-50s, Bert Brooks was in the field with that Smith number 99 V860, and he was starting in the back of the field. And you just had to watch him come up through there. And he would get to the front. And to me, I still remember that 50-odd years later, and it was a magical moment to be in the presence of that. And for that, we induct Bert Brooks into the New England Auto Racers Hall of Fame. Secondly was a lady from Rhode Island, Bertha Small, but Bertha was born and raised in Czechoslovakia. She came to this country when she was 16 years old on a tramp freighter, all by herself from Europe. Landed in New York City, had some relatives there, stayed with them for a while, learned the needle trades, and Then ended up in the Fall River, Mass area, which was still a hotbed for textile operations in those days. And that's where she met her husband when they were married in 1931. She started a gas station on her own in 1945 in Pawtucket, on Pawtucket Avenue, near Brown University. And one day, Ed Stone, who was involved in the early days of stock car racing, came by and asked Bertha if she would be interested in building a race car to run on the New England circuit. And she did. And one of her mechanics, Jack Foley, became her first driver. So she eventually moved to a large Esso station on North Main Street in Providence, where she stayed 11 years, and also ran a dry cleaning and laundry business near Brown University in partnerships with Fred Lucchese, who was inducted into the Hall last year. Their drivers were, after Foley, Joe McNulty, Cy Yates, Red Bolduc, who unfortunately was fatally injured in one of Bertha's cars in Norwood in 1960. And her last driver was Hop Harrington. And after Bertha decided to get out of that field, her car was sold to the Worcester Sand and Gravel, the people that sponsored Pete Hamilton, 69. During her career, she ran Seekonk, Norwood, Kingston, Palmyra and Fonda, New York, Lonsdale, Rhode Island, Waterford. And I gotta turn the page. She did run in one powder puff race herself and knew that wasn't for her. She was kind of the mechanical coordinator and a good team leader. She had a little trouble early on getting into the pits, but it never bothered her, the gender thing. And she always said her proudest accomplishment was having a top car, which she did. When she retired, she took up bowling and was a volunteer at hospitals in the Providence area. She died several years ago, but she truly was a pioneer in New England auto racing. Our other inductee is Harold Hard Luck Hanaford. And I thank Jolie for the notes because, as I've said before, prior years, we never got too much press down here on what was going on up in the Northland. He ran 20 years. From 1947, he started out on ice racing in Meredith Bay, which is, I believe, one of the little ports on Lake Winnipesaukee. And his first race he won on the Old Briar Road Course in Loudon. He ran Dover, Monroe, Manchester Motordrome, and even Daytona. He was 1960 Vermont State Championship sportsman cars, and 64 and 65 Thunder Road track champion. He won the inaugural Milk Bowl in 1962, which is a very prestigious race, and repeated in 1964. His last race at Briar, the promoter refused to pay Harold the winner's purse, claiming he dumped the leader. Nah. All the arguments was going on. Harold's jackman and a mountain of a man, Richard Hemlock, who ran a logging chain around the grandstands and attached it to his 47 Dodge truck, logging truck, which they used to haul Harold's race car with, the Pontiac late model. After considering the prospects, the promoter decided it would be in his best interest to pay, that's the first time I've heard that story, to pay Harold get his grandstands back. So today we'd like to welcome Harold Hard Luck Hanaford to the New England Auto Racers Hall of Fame, class of 2009. Come on up, Harold.
I'm Harold Hard Luck Hanaford, for you people that don't know me. And I got that handle, Hard Luck, from Ken Squire. And if you don't know Ken Squire, then you haven't been in racing very long. I started racing, like this gentleman said, in 1947 on the ice in Meredith. And I went from there to a half-mile clay track in Plymouth Fairgrounds in Plymouth, New Hampshire. And from there, they plowed that track off in the winter, and so that was the only track that I ever raced at that we had year-round racing. I ran many dirt tracks in Vermont, in New Hampshire, in the middle 50s. And I normally race Fords, flathead Fords. I did race a Dodge, and I did race for other people a few times, but most of the time I built my own cars, built my own engines, and raced a 32 flathead Ford. In fact, the last car that I built is on display outside. It's purple, you can't miss it. Now, this gentleman has taken some of my what I was going to say away. I don't know where he got all his information. I didn't think he knew anything about that last race that I had in Briars, where he is right. Gentlemen, my pit crew that I had with me, I had a little time, I wasn't going to get paid, but that is a true story. I had an old logging truck and about 3 30-foot chains, and they threw those over the fence and hooked them onto the bleachers. And said, I remember the gentleman say, you fellas are going to be in a lot of trouble. The pit crews at that time said, we don't care, we've been in trouble before. You either pay him or those bleachers are going to be out here on the track. So he looked at me and he said, come on over. He said, I'll pay you. I don't like it, but I will pay it. And he did. I still got a copy of the check, because a lot of people never thought he did pay me, but he did. I want to thank the promoters and owners of all the tracks and their staff, for without all those people, we wouldn't have any races. So I really got to thank all those people. I don't know how I can thank Joe Lee, Johnny Gamble, and other folks that got my name put on this list. And if it weren't for them, I know they kept my name coming here eventually, and so I have made it. But without their help, I know I never would. It's kind of like being dormant, you know. I haven't raced a car for over 40 years. And you're kind of dormant like trees in the winter, you know. After 35, 40 years, nobody knows you. Lloyd Hutchins, I'd like to have you stand if you would for a moment. Lloyd, I really believe that when you started restoring the old flatheads, so you must have been at it for at least a dozen years, and if it hadn't been for you, I don't know as we'd ever been recognized, because it's been so long since we started. And I know you must have of your own 10 or a dozen cars that you've restored with the original numbers, original colors of paint, and when we go to near meets, a lot of the original drivers. So I want to thank you for that. I don't know if you've been recognized. You kind of brought us back to life. Thank you, Lloyd. Okay, I'll go from there to Daytona. I never had a whole lot of sponsorship before with my cars. I did have some. But when I went to Daytona, I had a lot of help. There's a gentleman by the name of Dick Sherman from Plymouth read about me in some racing magazine, and his father actually used to be a mailman, dropped the mail off at our house. And he sent me a check and told me to buy Jack DeBrule's car, which was in Burlington, Vermont. And so I did. That the engine was blown. And Moses Express from Concord said, I've been down to Daytona ever since it's been there. And I've never had my name on the car. He said, would you put the name on the car? I said, what have I got to do for it? I said, buy me an engine, have it balanced. And he did. So now I've got a car, I've got the engine, no transportation. So my brother-in-law, who's sitting over here, Charlie McLeod, he's transported the car down to Daytona and back for me. And then I still had a problem. No tires. I didn't have any money to get any tires. So Johnny Gamble, and through him and Ken Squires, when I arrived, I had 4 new tires to race on. And that's how I got there. They had a 50-50 raffle around town that gave me some money. And I also had a buddy by the name of John Switzer that was in Vietnam at the time that sent me money to go too. So that's how I got to Daytona. Now, you know, as I look out on all of you people, a crowd like this, and I can't help but think I've never been under one roof with so many talented people in my life. And I am honored that you have accepted me as one of you. Thank you.
We'd like, before we veterans depart, to ask Wayne Brooks if he'd rise and be recognized by the crowd for his dad's accomplishments. There he is, over to my left. Thank you.